Good evening, councillors, staff and members of the public. Welcome to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale Ordinary Council meeting for April 2024, being Monday the 15th of April 2024. I'd like to acknowledge the Noongar people of the Butcher, the land that we gather on today. For thousands of years, their connection to country has provided knowledge, guidance, spirituality and life. We pay our respects to this ongoing connection as well as their elders, past, present and emerging. I'll just advise all members of the gallery that are present this evening that as per normal ordinary council meetings, this meeting will be audio recorded in accordance with council policy. If you're asking a public question or making a statement for deputation to the meeting, this will be audio recorded. Members of the public are reminded that no other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed. That brings us to agenda item number 1, which is attendance and apologies. There are no apologies, and I'd like to formally welcome the new councillor, Councillor Courtney Mazzini. That brings us to agenda item 2, which is public question time. 2.1 is responses to previous questions taken on notice. That is Ms. Jan Taylor. Questions provided to, or answers provided to Mrs. Lee Bond and also to Mrs. Michelle Harrington. That brings us to agenda item 2.2, and I declare public question time open at 7:02 p.m. and I'd ask Ms. Vanessa Reynolds to come forward and ask her question. Ms. Reynolds is not in attendance. That'll be taken on notice in the minutes. I'd like to ask Mr. Dave Atwell to come forward and ask his questions.
President, Dave Atwell, 52 Adams Street, Manijong. My first question is, my questions are in regards to the OCM, last OCM regarding Manijong sale yards. In the past 6 years, have any fire break infringements been issued by the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale for Lot 1, Evelyn Street, Manijong?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Atwell. I would ask the Director of Community Engagement to provide a response.
Thank you for the question. We'll take that question on notice and provide a response in writing.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Atwell, would you like to ask your second question?
Well, I'll ask it, but there's not much point in it. If yes, was the fire break infringement issued to the past or current lessee?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Atwell, and again, the Director will provide the same answer.
Yes, we'll take that question on notice and a response will be provided in writing.
Thank you, Director. I'd ask Ms. Lisa Brazier to come forward and ask her question.
Good evening, councillors. My first question is that on the 18th of January 2024, the council posted on the Manijong Community Facebook page, and I quote, "In December, a medium-term solution was put in place for the next 2 to 3 years where there would be 2 green waste and 2 valet hard waste collections per annum. This allows time for a long-term permanent solution as to how waste is handled in the Shire." So my question is that the Shire agenda for tonight states that from the OCM, you are calling for tenders for pre-booked bulk waste collection services, but there was no specification of the number of pickups. So how is it that a councillor can advise the community in January that we are having 2 pickups where in actual fact you're voting on it tonight?
Thank you for your question, Ms. Brazier. I'd ask the Director of Corporate Services to provide an answer. Sorry, Infrastructure Services. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. President. Thank you for the question. The closure of the waste transfer station initiated a crisis management plan and significant communications to address this change in service to the community during this time. At the time of the post, the Shire's website had information indicating 2 collections would occur per year. Officers considered 2 3 collections per household per year to be a reasonable level of service and consistent with the median level of service provided by neighboring councils. However, this was not included in the report and resolution about this matter to provide flexibility in determining the tender, subject to tender price as received.
Thank you, Director. Mrs. Braze, would you like to ask your second question?
Sorry, Mr. President, before you move on, could I please, under 1017, make a personal explanation?
Yes, Councillor Duggan, I would warn you, I suppose, that the member of the public hasn't mentioned any person, but if you would like to make a personal explanation, you may do so.
Thanks so much, Mr. President. My personal explanation is just to say that on a number of the Facebook posts, the link to the Shire's webpage indicating the 2 collections per year was noted. If the resident would like to look that up for herself, I'm happy to send her the link.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Ms. Braze, would you like to ask your second question?
Thank you, Councillor Coles. I just refer back to my first question, and it was in relation to what was stated as the officer's outcome from the December OCM. My second question is, given a councillor has advised the community in January 2024 that we will be receiving 2 hard waste collections, when you're actually making that decision tonight, do you feel the process for tendering was compromised, and does the councillor have any relationship to the company's tendering?
I thank you for your second question. I'd ask the Director of Corporate Service to provide a response.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Mr. Brazier. Given that the specifications for the tender were based on a limit of 2 bookings per annum per household, officers do not feel the tendering process has been compromised. And in answer to the second part of your question, councillors are responsible for managing any interest that they have in regard to any matter before council.
Thank you, Director, for the response. And Ms. Braze, I'd ask you to ask your third question.
Would council consider additional training for all councillors on the appropriate use of social media?
Thank you for your third question. Again, I'd ask the Director of Corporate Service to provide a response.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I envisage that at the May OCM, council will consider a report regarding the next steps of the value and culture training that they've been undertaking.
Thanks, President.
Thank you, Director. I'd ask Ms. Michelle Rich to come forward and ask her question.
Good evening, councillors, officers and staff. I have 3 questions this evening, the first one being, have the FTEs within the Shire's communication team increased between the 1st of September 2023 and the 15th of April 2024? And if so, on what dates and by how many?
I thank you for your question, Ms. Rich. I would ask the Director of Community Engagement to please provide a response.
Thank you for your question. Casual Communications Officer commenced on the 1st of November 2023 to support with increased communication expectations and requirements such as the waste transfer station closure, the North Ward election and increased videography completed in-house. This was funded through savings in the salary budget. And in the mid-year budget review, Council approved an increase in the casual communication salary by $48,668 to fund this position to the 30th of June 2024. If Council wants to maintain this increased level of service in communications, an additional FTE will need to be considered as part of the 24-25 budget process.
Thank you for the answer, Director. Mrs. Rich, would you like to ask your second question?
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. My second question is, what training has been undertaken by any members of the communications team in the above timeframe, and what upskilling, as in what new skills are now available that previously were not, has it provided and it has provided to the community?
Thank you for your second question, Mrs. Rich. I'd again ask the Director of Community Engagement to provide a response.
Thank you for the question. No external training has been undertaken by the communications team to upskill. Officers have started using third-party platforms with greater graphic design capability for production of material to allow for the delivery of internal design and video content.
Thank you for the answer, Director. Again, Mrs. Rich, I'd ask you to ask your third question.
Thank you for the answer, Mr. Oliver. My third question is, what is the cost to the Shire for the items in questions 1 and 2 between the above mentioned dates provided in an itemised breakdown?
Thank you for your third question, Mrs. Rich. Again, I'd ask the Director of Community Engagement to provide a response.
Thank you for the question. The cost for items in question 1 and question 2 are approximately $66,536.52.
Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, Mrs. Rich. Are there any members of the public who'd like to come forward and ask a question? Thank you, Mrs. Bond.
Consideration of the request to relinquish reserve 19895, agenda item 10.1.10, in favour of a private resident who already has the use of this land in the best interest of the ratepayer or designed to favour the resident.
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Bond. That question will be taken on notice. Did you have another question, Mrs. Bond? Please ask it.
Monopoles have a 40-kilometre coverage and can have coverage up to 72 kilometres. Why is there one of these in Richardson Street, Serpentine, about 10 metres from home? Who gave permission for this to be installed? Were the ratepayers residents given all the information about these towers and the option to object? Where has the Shire followed the requirements for this installation? When will this tower be removed so as to comply with all the rules? I refer my question taken on notice at the 18th of March here. OCM regarding these towers. What government agencies does the Shire consult with regarding the installation of monopoles?
Thank you for your second question, Mrs. Bond. Again, that question will be taken on notice and answer will be provided. Do you have a third question, Mrs. Bond?
I, Serpentine Jarrahdale Shire Council, agree to a forensic audit of the Shire. For example, why is it considered okay for the ratepayers of the Shire who have been paying the electricity account for a private business until I was seen taking photos of a nasty little connection? Not only the use of ratepayers' money, not for their benefit. There is more for the ratepayer to gain financially than it would cost to have all this cleared up with a forensic audit. Which councillors support the ratepayer?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Bond. That will be taken on notice and answer provided in due course. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to come forward and ask a question? There being no further questions from the floor, I declare public question time closed at 7:13 p.m. That brings us to agenda item number 3, which is public statement time. Public statement time was commenced at 7:13 p.m. and I don't believe Miss Vanessa Reynolds has attended, so her statement will be taken into the minutes. Public statement number 2 is from Michael Von Den Doodle. If you'd like to come forward, please, Mr. Van Den Doodle, and I'll make your statement.
Good evening, Mr. President, Rob Coles and councillors. I'm here this evening to say a massive thank you to the Serpentine Jarrahdale Council and staff. Back in June 2022, I submitted a petition with nearly 100 signatures of people living within the Munijong town site and specifically on Adonis Street and Richardson Street. We requested a footpath be constructed on these 2 roads. You worked with the petition, you listened to our concerns, you got costings and engineers done. It was included in the 2023-24 budget and now in early 24, it has all been completed. My wife and children are personally very grateful for the footpath. It has made a huge difference when walking around the town site each morning, getting kids to the bus on Patterson Street. Being able to walk safely next to the road is very reassuring. We live on Adonis Street and have noticed a marked increase in foot traffic on the footpath. In fact, people from all over town are now venturing out and walking simply because there is a safe option. Wheelchair-bound people are also using the footpath, whereas before they had to use the road and hope for the best with vehicles not showing any courtesy. I'd like to thank several people for their advice and guidance. My first meeting to discuss the petition with Mr. Kenneth Parker, Mr. Paul Martin, Mr. Fraser Sullivan, and Mr. Reza Naja Fazada. Mr. Paul Martin also for his ongoing support and ability to answer my calls and emails when I had questions throughout the 1.5-year process. Mr. Hugh Jones, our local member for Parliament, for his support, and also Mr. Dave Atwell, former councillor of the South Ward, for his support, encouragement, and helping me stay positive all the way through the process. Lastly, and perhaps obviously, a big thank you to all the residents of Mundijong who signed the petition. We wouldn't have a footpath without them. Till next time, and again, on behalf of the petitioners, thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement, Mr. Van Dendel. And I think it's appropriate that I mention that the ex-president and ex-deputy president are both in the room tonight, and they played a part in that. So I would also pass on my thanks to them, and thank you for making your statement. I'd now like to ask Mr. Keith Gilbert from Atlas Planning to come forward and make his statement.
Good evening. So firstly, I'm not from Atlas Plan. They assisted my father in preparing this. So my name is Keith Gilbert. I'm Keith Gilbert Jr. And I'm reading this statement on behalf of my parents, Keith and Mary Gilbert. And it's with regard to the Mundijong Precincts E1 and E2 local structure plan. So good evening to the Shire President and elected members. My name is Keith Gilbert and I'm speaking to you about the proposed Mundijong structure plan. I'm a resident and landowner within the proposed structure plan area and have been for many years. Mundijong and the broader community meant a great deal to me. My family and I purchased this land in 1969. I was pleased to hear that in the officer's report, it was recommended that the proposed primary school location be reconsidered on our Adam Street property. I urge councillors to follow the officer's recommendation in this regard. I also note that the Department of Education objected to the primary school location. This is particularly important. The proposed location is inconsistent with both the state and local planning requirements. What irks me the most is that this is not the location shown on the district structure plan. The starting of the school places an unfair burden on my family. I feel that it has been put here because we are not developers driving this process. There are much larger sites within the area better suited for a primary school. Our property is the only lot within the structure plan area that is privately owned other than by developers. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening, and I again urge you to support your officer recommendation in regards to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert, for your statement. I'd ask Ms. Lisa Brazier to come forward and make her statement.
Good evening, councillors. Lisa Brazier, PO Box 18 Mundijong. My statement relates to item 10.1.9, proposed local structure plan, Mundijong Precinct E1 and E2. On the 10th of January 2024, a resident innocently posted on the Mundijong Community Facebook page alerting the community that the changes to the Mundijong Precinct E1 and E2 LSP were open for comment. Perfectly fine, and a great community post. However, it was quickly overtaken by a councillor posting their views to questions asked. Councillor then went further to encourage residents to follow the lead from the June 2023 OCM regarding the development in Cardup, and that the submissions from residents and the Shire's responses to those submissions were sent through to the WA Planning Commission. And with this particular development, it proved that residents' words do get heard and do make a difference. Councillors, the issue I have with this statement is that it is completely misleading to the community, as E1 and E2 have already received planning approval from the WAPC many years ago. And tonight's agenda item is simply improving connectivity and drainage and bringing it in line with the current Mundijong Whitby DSP. I've said this many times before, both in this place and the other council chambers. In 1984, the Department of Planning came to meet with the Shire and the major landowners of the day. It was determined that the Mundijong town site would be considered future urban, from Mundijong Road to Bishop Road, from future Tonkin Highway to Soldiers Road. Over the years, that area has since grown. Around 2010, there was great interest shown for the land from developers and many farms were purchased. Sometime after that, the 5 major landowners of Mundijong Whitby met with the Shire and entered into a legal agreement to assist funding and develop the district structure plan collaboratively with the Shire, knowing that this was not their responsibility at the time, but the Shire did not have sufficient funds to complete the project. The original DSP was completed on time, and through that process, it was determined to divide Mundijong Whitby into cells based on land ownership and fragmentation. E1 and E2 had multiple owners, and each had developed their own structure plan for their respective holdings. These plans have all been approved, and essentially work can begin tomorrow. Over time, the Mundijong Whitby district structure plan has changed to keep it in line with current planning practices, and the ownership of land holdings with E1 and E2 have also changed. The current major landowners of E1 and E2 have decreased in numbers, and they are now working together. And what you are being presented with here tonight is an alteration to what they believe will provide a better outcome for the cell in connectivity and drainage. Now, here is the difficulty in my views that you have tonight. The community has been misled that their comments will make a difference, and they may, but they also may not. Because if you condition the hell out of this proposal, and the landowners feel it will become too difficult to develop, I imagine they will simply produce the inferior product that already has the approvals to go. On the flip side, you may need to put some conditions in place. Either way, at no time on the Facebook post was the community advised by the councillor that E1 and E2 had already been approved, and this was simply a modification. So now the community has very different expectations on what the possible outcome will be for this item. Councillors, please don't be confused that I do not think the community should have its say. They absolutely should, nor should the developers simply get everything they wish. Process is to be completed with integrity and transparency. What I am upset about is the misleading perception given by a councillor to the community. Whilst none of you own any land holding in the South Ward, you are making decisions tonight that will shape the future of a significant part of the Mundijong Whitby development. And all I ask each one of you is that you are across the documentations yourselves personally. You take your questions and understandings from the directors and not that of other councillors. We as a Shire are rapidly growing in an urban population, and we need to work alongside those businesses wishing to invest here for the best outcomes of our community. We need to present ourselves as professional, and your roles as councillors are that of governance, like company directors, and do not cross over to operational matters. Finally, please stay off Facebook if you're unsure of your facts, because misleading the community does not assist either the officers or staff who are working to improve our community scorecard, and attract investments within the Shire. Thank you.
I'd ask Mr. Dave Atwell to come forward and make his statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dave Atwell, 52 Adam Street, Mundijong. My statement is regarding the footpath along Adonis and Richardson Streets. I would like to thank the staff for the great job on this project. It was well handled from start to finish, so congratulations to all concerned. I would also congratulate Mr. Michael Vandendoel for his great work gaining signatures and promoting this project. It is great to see a person stand up and advocate for something they believe in, rather than sit back and do nothing. Michael showed what can be done by actions rather than whinging. I haven't got in here, which I meant to add in. It just proves what you can actually do if you work with the Shire rather than against them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atwell, for a very well-made statement. That brings us to public statements of which notice has not been given. Before I invite anyone to come forward and make any public statement, I'll refer everyone in the gallery to our standing orders, specifically points of order 15.4. 15.4 subsection B, that offensive or insulting language should not be used. Whilst I'm happy to give liberty to members of the public to come forward and make a statement without notice, I would ask everyone and anyone who decides to come forward and make a statement, this is not an opportunity to berate councillors. It's not an opportunity to berate staff. If you have a statement you'd like to make, that is right within your rights without that being on notice, but I would remind everyone to be respectful of all people at the table. Are there any questions or, sorry, any statements that people would like to make from the floor? Mrs. Lee Bond.
Now that we've tried a monopoly on the council, how can anyone believe there would be any fairness with agenda items? All this talk about transparency and accountability, item 9.1, allowing the public to be present at what I have understood for a long time, despiteful bullying episodes, and then it continues at the OCMs. Why would any decent ratepayer want to waste their time watching people throw tantrums, demean people, bully them, grandstand, and in general behave like rats fighting over the last piece of cheese? We get enough of bad behaviour at the OCMs, and no doubt there is an agenda behind this motion. All a waste of time. Watch for the agenda. In answer to my question at the 18th of March, here, OCM, redeferred rates. I did do my homework on this matter and got the help I required, but not from the email sent to me by the CEO.
Thank you for your statement, Mrs. Bond. Are there any other statements that would like to be made from the floor? Yeah, Mrs. Michelle Rich, please come forward.
Good evening, councillors, officers and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to make a statement this evening, given the open mic policy that the Shire has. I was quite surprised this afternoon when I had a response from my questions that I had submitted. In regards to the operation of tonight's meeting, and I must say, along the lines of what President Coles has just read out to the entire meeting. What was sent out in the email I received from the staff, and thank you very much to the staff member, it was a lovely email. In part it reads, as a formal proceeding of council, public statements, public questions and their responses are recorded in the minutes of the relevant council meeting. It also states, in accordance with the Shire's standing orders, you must extend due courtesy and respect to council and the processes under which it operates and take direction from the person presiding. I would hope moving forward that certain members of the community who attend meetings that have an interest in what happens in our Shire are shown the same due courtesy and that they are not harassed and bullied by other members of the community and it is allowed to continue by the presiding member. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement, Mrs. Rich. Again, I'll remind you, if you have any concerns about any process in this council or this Shire, please make a complaint. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to come forward and make a statement? That being the case, public statement time is concluded at 7:29 p.m. That brings us on to agenda item number 4, which is petitions and deputations. I'd ask Mr. Jeremy Cordina regarding item 10.1.9, proposed local structure plan, Manajong precincts E1 and E2, to please come forward and make his deputation.
Thank you for your time this evening, council officers. I suppose I'll start by just giving you an introduction. So we've been in Serpentine Jarrahdale now for 9 years up in Byford, but I've been in Serpentine Jarrahdale for 20 plus as an engineer before I became a developer. And with our Manajong project, we're going to be here for another 20 to 30 years, depending on how big that particular development gets. So we have a long-standing history with Serpentine. We intend on being here, excuse me, for a very, very long time. I haven't come here to be out of the officer's recommendation. In fact, I've report the officers' recommendation. We will take 2 items up with Commission, being the density along the proposed Tongan Highway. That density could be higher because it's not a transitionary arrangement to a lower density. It's just offer to a highway. So that'll be our argument to the Commission. And then secondly, the location of the primary school, our argument was that it's central and contains more trees, but we won't die in a ditch over that either. So the main purpose for coming here tonight was to thank council's officers, their support in working through this structure plan. We have over the last 5 years purchased pretty much that whole strip down the highway. We intend to start work in this year with having secured Water Corporation support to provide the $20 million pump station that's located on the western boundary of the DSP. And without that particular piece of infrastructure, no further development really is viable Serpentine, because without the pump station, you can't develop any more lots. So again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to working with Serpentine for the next few decades.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cordina, for your deputation. That brings us on to agenda item number 5, which is the President's report. So good evening, elected members, residents, ratepayers and staff. Welcome to April 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. In particular, I'd like to single out and welcome the brand new Councillor for North Ward, Councillor Courtney Mazzini, who was elected at last month's extraordinary election in the North Ward. So welcome, Courtney. Before I begin this month's President's message proper, I'd like to talk to you about the scroll which I received at the Harmony Night Festival. So this is from the Chungwa Association, and it's quite a nice scroll that was presented to me representing the Shire. So this will now be greatly received and be placed somewhere appropriate in the Shire. It's in the President's office on display, but certainly I'll speak to the CEO and find a better place for this to be displayed in the Shire building, because it is a gift for the whole Shire and the community. On that vein, the Harmony Night Festival was a fantastic event. We also welcomed 47 new Australian citizens to the Shire, which is the largest ever for this Serpentine Jarrahdale Shire. And the event, being the Harmony event, was attended by more than 3,000 people. They all enjoyed the variety of multicultural food and music on offer. It really was a fantastic event. I was also pleased last month to attend the Shire's launch of the new council plan for 2023 through to 2033. This plan was developed by our community for our community, and we should all be proud to implement it, which reflects what our community cares and wants. It's hard to believe that the summer events season is nearly over, and there's still plenty more going on in our Shire. As well as the Youth Week, the BMX Byford, or the Byford BMX Club, Oz Cycling BMX Series also took place in March, with about 2,000 people enjoying the fantastic event. The first policy concept forum held in Jarrahdale last month was a great success. It provided an important face-to-face forum for the community groups. Thanks to Jarrahdale Community Collective, the Jarrahdale Futures and Jarrahdale Forest Protectors for giving us all an insight into their work and the issues that they face on a daily basis. I must also mention the Easy Beats Accessible Disco held at the Byford Districts Country Club last month. It's so important that people with disability feel accepted, connected and have the ability to engage socially. It really was a fantastic event, and being there and seeing members of the public walking past and seeing people with disabilities enjoying themselves on the dance floor actually gave me goosebumps. And quite simply, this now shows that we are a council that cares, and I'm very, very proud of everyone, what they're doing in that space. I know that the General Manager, Ray Carey, is making upgrades to the Country Club to ensure that everyone feels welcome. It's great to see local business championing accessibility and shows what a caring community we are. Finally, our official 2024 Anzac Day commemorations will be held at the Mundijong War Memorial here on Patterson Street on April the 25th. There are a number of different events planned, including the dawn service, the gunfire breakfast, processional march, a commemorative service and morning tea. I'd love for you to join me as we pay our respects to the brave individuals who fought for our freedom and served our country, and those men and women who still continue to serve today. Thank you very much. That brings us on to agenda item number 6, which is declaration of elected members and officers' interests. The Chief Executive Officer, being Sir Paul Martin, declared a financial interest in item 10.1.10. Request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, being lots 295 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is that the CEO involves, or this matter involves an ex-councillor at the Shire. The extent of the interest the CEO has is that the ex-councillor voted on matters pertaining to the CEO's employment. Myself, being President Coles, declared impartiality interest in item 10.1.10. Request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, lots 295 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is the landowner was a previous councillor from 2019-2023. The extent of my interest is impartiality. Councillor Tricia Duggan declared impartiality interest again in item 10.1.10. Request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, lot 295 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is friendship. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Duggan has previously served on council with Mr D'Agostino, the proponent. Councillor Morgan Bice declared impartiality interest in item 10.1.10. Request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, lots 295 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is the applicant is a former councillor. The extent of the interest is a former working relationship on council. Finally, Councillor Shane Mack declared impartiality interest in the same item, being item 10.1.10. Request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, being lots 295 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is a property owner was a former member of council while Councillor Mack was on council. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Mack and the member served together. That brings us to agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 7 is confirmation of minutes of previous council meetings. Agenda item 7.1, ordinary council meeting, 18th of March 2024. Is there a council like to move a motion pertaining to that? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item number 8, which is nil. Agenda item 9 is motions of notice which have been given. 9.1, notice of motion improving council transparency and accountability. Is there a council who'd like to move a motion?
Shire President, I'm happy to move the alternate officer recommendation if I can have a question before I do.
Certainly, Councillor Bice.
To the CEO concerning the officer's alternate recommendation point 2, reviewing the trial. What does the CEO envisage that would entail?
I might ask the Director of Corporate Services to assist with answering the question, but I would imagine it's going to be a report back to council to indicate how the trial's gone and whether council wishes to consider that occurring or not. Director of Corporate Services, anything else to add?
No, nothing further to add, Mr CEO.
Thank you. Another question, Councillor Bice?
I'd probably ask for the CEO's advice because I would like to firm that point up so that we do include some tangible things, like, for example, bringing it to a PCF, perhaps doing a survey, an anonymous survey with councillors to gauge how they felt, give feedback on the process. Whether that needs to be put in the motion or whether officers are just happy to receive that feedback under that framework, I'm happy to take the CEO's guidance.
Mr. CEO, are you prepared to answer advice?
Mr. President, and thanks for the question, Councillor Bice. I think if the council has particular aspects that it'd like to see making part of the assessment of the trial, that's better off in the resolution rather than not, would be my thought. Otherwise, how are we going to base that on there? So if the wording was adjusted to include, including discussion at a PCF and a survey, that might be sufficient.
I wouldn't want to overcomplicate it with any more than that. So it may be review the trial with a PCF item and survey to council.
If you minded to move that, Councillor Bice, I'd be happy to second it.
Thank you.
And survey of councillors.
Thank you.
Are you happy with that wording then, Councillor Bice? Yeah.
I'm very happy, Mr. CEO. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bice, and I'm happy to second that motion. Sorry, Mr. Director.
Just ask you a question about the meeting. Does that a PCF item and survey end, or is that followed by then a report to council of the outcome?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Director? I'm not used to being on the receiving end of questions.
Apologies, councillor. Do you expect a report to council, or would the PCF and survey suffice?
I'm mindful of not overcomplicating things, so I would probably leave it to the CEO's discretion. I would imagine that if in the PCF and if in the survey there were wildly divergent views and controversial things raised, then that would probably require a report. However, if it runs smoothly, then I don't want to over engineer this. So I'm more than comfortable leaving that at the officer's discretion.
Thank you, Councillor Box. We've got a mover and I was seconding it. Madam Minute Secretary. Is anyone opposed to that motion? Motion is passed, or sorry, motion is carried unanimously.
Do I need to provide?
Yes, please, councillor Bias.
To provide a structure for the trial of improved transparency measures. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 9.2. Notice the motion, Switch Your Thinking, SYT and South East Regional Energy Group. Is there a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Mack.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to propose the elected member recommendation as circulated.
Thank you. As per the agenda, is there a councillor who's happy to second that motion? I'm happy to second the motion. Is there anyone who's opposed to the motion?
Mr. President, not opposed, but if I may ask some questions of Councillor Mack, please.
Certainly.
My apologies that I'm not asking these during a Q&A session, but unfortunately it came to us after that. So once again, my apologies for asking these questions now. I guess my first question is, why is it just the CERIG Switch Your Thinking group that this has been requested of? We're part of the Peel Harvey Catchment Council, Peel Community Development Group, Peel Harvey Biosecurity Group, parts of Darling Range, Land Care. There's a number of other groups that we provide staff time and financial support to. I guess my question is, why CERIG?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Mackey, happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I think it's just part of a routine to start somewhere. We need to do it, and we had recently had a report that came back from Switch Your Thinking, which I did question to what benefits we were getting. I had that question. I thought other councillors might, and it was a timely time to do the review.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Councillor, do you have any other questions?
I do have one, if
Please.
that's okay. Thank you. My next question. I'm not sure if you're aware that CERIG and Switch Your Thinking over the last few weeks have actually been going through quite a significant internal investigation onto how it works for all three of the partner councils. And I guess my concern at the moment is if we are to look to do a report now.
Sorry, Councillor Duggan, have you got a question?
It is getting to a question. Thank you.
Please, thanks.
Are you looking at how CERIG and Switch Your Thinking was set up, or are you looking at what is proposed to be set up? I'm just not sure, which camp you're looking at. Can you answer that question? Whether you're looking at where we were at, or what we're going to the change that we're going through now for the next, for the next setup.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mackey. Happy to answer those questions.
I am, and it's quite simply just to consider this as part of our upcoming budget. It's not saying that we're going to be a part of it. It's not saying we're not going to. It's just to have a look at the financial benefits and gains that what we are getting for the finances that we are putting into it, and to make sure we're getting value for money out of it. And I think it would be, something we should be doing routinely for all of the groups that we are a part of, to make sure that we're getting the value for our finances we're putting into it.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Do you have any other questions, Councillor Dogan?
No, but I do oppose. Thank
Okay, so
you.
we've got a mover, a second, and we've got a member who opposes it. Councillor Mack, would you like to open debate?
Thank you. It's I'll be very brief with it. The motion was simply to have a look at the process of what we're getting from Switch Your Thinking, and subsequently through the Sarah Group, what value we're getting for the money that we spend to it. It's not to say that we do or don't get good value from it. It is simply to get a report back to council so we can have a better understanding to consider it as part of this budget process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. As a seconder, I'll make a couple of points. One is it is value for money. I think that's probably the key thing with this motion. Simply, as I always state, the Shire has no money. The money we have is ratepayers' money, so we need to be responsible and prudent with how we spend money. I think this is a fairly low intensive task for the CEO to do a review into what we're getting for Switch Your Thinking in terms of what we're spending in terms of ratepayers' money, what we've achieved by being part of the Switch Your Thinking, and then potentially use this as a way to even advocate as part of that group with the City of Armidale and City of Gosnells to actually tell them what we want from them moving forward. And I know that there was something in terms of streetlights which was discussed, and quite simply, I was a little bit left wanting with the answers to that issue. So is there a better way for us to advocate for more climatic and power responsible measures? Is this the only way we can do it? And quite simply, we're getting value for money from our ratepayers' money. Councillor Doug, would you like to speak against?
Thanks, President Coles. I'm certainly not against the idea of doing a report, and absolutely I agree that value for money should always be our highest priority. And with that in mind, that is why I question the timing of the report now, where to me it's like we're moving from an old house to a new house, and we're asking our Shire officers to do a report on a house, but we don't know which house we're in yet. All three of the local governments that are in CEREG have all said that they were not satisfied with what they were getting from CEREG, from Switch Your Thinking. And as I say, it is currently going through quite a large overhaul to improve the services. I feel that it's unfair to be doing a report on a group of people who are only just trying to figure out what it is that their new guidelines are going to be. I think that it's more fair that we give them a chance to settle in and show what they and our Shire staff put together and produce. And then if we wish to do a report down the track, I think that that's fair. But certainly at the moment, I feel the timing is just not quite right. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dogan. Is there anyone else like to speak for the motion? Would you like to close debate, Councillor Mack?
Yeah, thank you. And couple of things there I'd like to point out, that we talk about the changes that are undergoing. Is it fair that we as a Shire spend our ratepayer money on something that we've said isn't working for the next 12 months while they undertake changes? Do we know how long that's going to take? That is the sort of thing that I'd like to see in this report, to make sure we're getting value for money. Can we cease payment for 12 months until we have a new direction from the group? What are our options available to us? And I think that's, prudent towards giving good budget analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. All those in favour of the motion? It's 5. All those against? Motion is carried 6-1. As part of the Shire's efforts to ensure the efficiency and effectiveness of meetings, tonight's meeting will include the opportunity for matters to be considered by Council en bloc. This means that a group of matters dealt with in multiple reports can be grouped together. Considered and voted upon as a single motion. Matters that are not to be included in en bloc decisions are those which require absolute majority, matters to be determined behind closed doors, declared interests made in relation to the item, and deputations or statements made in relation to the item. Officers have prepared a list of matters that meet this criteria. I'll now read these report numbers and titles and invite any elected member to identify any matters that they wish to be removed from an en bloc consideration. Removing a matter from en bloc consideration does not signify objection to a matter and does not require the matter to be debated. Removing a matter from en bloc simply means that the matter is to be considered separately. The matters that have been identified for consideration en bloc at tonight's meeting are as follows. 10.1.2, proposed road naming amendment, lot 9509 Briggs Road, Byford. 10.1.3, proposed road naming application, lot 9066 Orton Road, Byford. 10.1.4, recommendation development application submitted under the Metropolitan Region Scheme, Byford Senior High School, Stage 4. 10.1.5, Whitby Town Estate, Stage 3D, Local Development Plan number 21. 10.1.8, Local Planning Scheme number 3, Amendment number 3, Omnibus Amendment. 10.1.11, which is West Manajong Industrial Area Utility Research Project, removal from Corporate Business Plan. 10.3.2, Monthly Financial Report, February 2024. 10.4.2, Proposed Licence Agreement with the Public Transport Authority Western Australia for rail land at Serpentine, PTA Plan 5088. Could councillors please indicate if they wish to remove any of the aforementioned reports from the matters to be considered en bloc? Is there a councillor who is happy to move a motion for those items to be carried en bloc? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Councillor Duggan, you happy to second?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Is anyone opposed to moving those items en bloc? Motion is carried unanimously. Agenda item number 10 is Chief Executive Officer reports. 10.1 is Development Services reports. That matter has been moved en bloc.
10.1.2.
Sorry, that's not, I do apologise. 10.1 is Development Services reports. 10.1.1, proposed road naming application, lot 101 and 34 Evans Way, lot 1 Abernethy Road, lot 133 Bushman Glade, and lot 9001 Bushman Glade, Byford. Is there a councillor like to move this motion?
I'd like to move the motion being option 1, thanks, but removal of point 2. Removal of endorses the following second preference road names for the purpose of community consultation as contained within attachment 1, and request the Chief Executive Officer provide a future report upon the conclusion of consultation. The Council's final consideration, a flame burner. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bice. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously.
And Councillor Duggan, can we get a reason for the difference in the officer recommendation, please?
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Question the suitability of the name considering the high fire risk area in which we live. Thanks.
You just repeat, so question the suitability of the name.
Considering the high fire risk area in which we live.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You happy with that wording on the screen?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Councillor Duggan. That brings us to agenda item 10.1.2. This one was moved en bloc. At 10.1.3, proposed road naming application, lot 9066 Horton Road, that was moved en bloc. 10.1.4 is recommendation on development applications submitted under the Metropolitan Region Scheme, Byford Senior High School, Stage 4. That was moved en bloc. 10.1.5 is Whitby Town Estate Stage 3D Local Development Plan. Again, that was moved en bloc. That brings us to agenda item 10.1.6, 10.1.6 Peel Harvey Catchment Council contribution towards funding of program for fencing and revegetation, I've got there eventually, of rural drains and waterways. Is there a councillor like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an alternate motion I would like to move, which I've circulated to all councillors, but for the benefit of the gallery, I will read. It retains the officer's recommendation, but adds, subject to the following conditions. 1, the funding is only to be utilised as top-up funding for waterway fencing applications received from landowners within the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. 2, the top-up funding is based on the equivalent of $1,500 per kilometre of fencing. 3, the Shire will pay funding upon being invoiced from PHCC, which contains details of the successful applicant and the amount of the top-up based on point 2. And finally, 4, an annual report from PHCC being provided, which outlines the completion of fencing undertaken within the Shire and the benefits this has produced. The reason for the difference being to ensure that the funding is explicitly linked to applications from Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale landowners and to provide a feedback loop to monitor the outcomes of this program.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there a councillor who is happy to second the alternate motion? Councillor Bishop, is there anyone opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously.
Councillor Bias, I presume you're happy with that wording?
That brings us to agenda item 10.1.7, consideration to advertise shortlist options for future regional level playground facility for the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. I have circulated an alternate motion, which I'm happy to move, and just for the benefit of the gallery, it's as per the officer's recommendation, but including Clem Kentish Reserve as a third option. So it's Woodland Grove Public Open Space, Carduck Brook, co-located near future Orton Road District Open Space, Kiernan Park and Clem Kentish Reserve. Is there a councillor who's happy to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Is there anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Reasons for difference is to include the southern part of the Shire, specifically Serpentine. I'm happy with that. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 10.1.8, which was moved on block. 10.1.9. Agenda item 10.1.9 is proposed local structure plan, Munijong Precinct E1 and E2. Is there a councillor who's happy to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Which motion are you moving?
Happy to move the officer's recommendation, thanks.
Thank you. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the officer's recommendation as moved by Councillor Duggan? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried unanimously.
Mr. President, I've declared a financial interest in item 10.1.10, so I'm going to leave the room.
Thank you. Thank you, Director, Corporate Services. Agenda item 10.1.10, Reserve 19895, request to relinquish vesting over Reserve 19895, lots 279 and 1343, Cargodditch Road, Oakford. Is there a councillor who's happy to move a motion?
Mr. President, can I request a deferment of this motion, please, of this item?
So Councillor Duggan has requested a deferment. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the deferment?
Once we clarify whether it's a procedural motion or one of our written motions.
Councillor Duggan, what's your intention?
Procedural, thanks.
Procedural motion. Is there a councillor who's happy to second that procedural motion? Thank you, councillor Bias. Is anyone opposed? Sorry.
Just adjourn. Because it's adjourned, it's she needs to tell us when.
So I think it's 12.2, and I'll just go back to councillor Duggan to see whether she wants to go to the next item on the agenda, or she wants to defer this to bring it back at a later date. And if it is the second, then you need to explain when you'd like it to come back. Thank you, Director.
I'll go for, if I can choose a second, and we can defer it just till the next ordinary council meeting, please.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. Councillor Bias is second. Are you happy with that?
I am, as long as the director is happy that that can be satisfied under the procedural motions. Yep, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Bias. So the next OCM, so the May OCM. Thank you.
Shire President, I will be pedantic at this point because that is technically a resolution. I'm looking to the director. That's a resolution. That's not one of our permissible procedural motions concerning. It would be either that the question's adjourned or that we proceed to next business. And are we able to actually stipulate a return date in the procedural motion?
I apologise. I will start again. So I'll just read from the standing orders, councillor. The motion that the question be adjourned if carried causes all debate on the substantive motion or amendment to cease, but to continue at a time stated in the motion.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, thank you, councillor Bias. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Director. Can someone please invite Mr. Martin back to his seat? Thank you, Mr. Martin. The council resolved for the matter to be adjourned to the next OCM being May 2024. That brings us to agenda item 10.1.11, West Munijong Industrial Area Utility Research Project removal from corporate business plan that has been passed on block. Brings us to item 10.2.1. 10.2 is infrastructure services reports. 10.2.1 award request for tender RFT 02-2024 pre-booked bulk verge and illegal dumping collection services.
Mr. President, I just want to point out that there was a typographical error which we brought to councillors' attention in the report. On page 142 in the table, area 2, Munijong, Whitby, Karrakup and Jarrahdale. The officer's report says 11,479 households there. It should be 1,479. We did email councillors about that, just to advise councillors, but just for recording in the gallery's benefit.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. There was an email received. Thank you. And I'm happy to move an alternate motion, which there was some communication last week, but the alternate motion is as per the officer's recommendation, with the addition of paragraph 4, which is authorise the Chief Executive Officer to commence the provision of pre-booked bulk waste collection services in June 2024 and allocate additional $30,000 to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale salaries budget to fund the recruitment of 2 temporary staff during June and July 2024. Would you like me to?
Mr. President, while that happens, the Director of Corporate Services might help us out with some wording around the budget amendment part of that. Do you want to refer it to the financial and costing review?
Mr. CEO, I understand that the budget's already been allocated for wages. It's probably worth noting that there'll be extra draw on that budget line, but I think that's as much as we need at this point.
Director of Infrastructure, do you want to just explain to us what you're suggesting as well?
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Through you, Mr. President, to add the point 4 would require amendment of point 1B to change August to June.
You happy to do that, Mr. President, as a mover?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director of Infrastructure Services. So 1B would be removal of August and insert June. Thank you. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anyone opposed? Thank you, Councillor Bias. So in opening debate, this has been the single biggest issue that council has dealt with since the waste transfer station was closed in October last year. Quite simply, the community is agitated, the community is vocal, the community wants us to act. We have acted in terms of the green waste verge collection, and certainly that has been very positive. The communication we've had back from ratepayers and residents alike is that the Shire has listened and the Shire has acted, and the Shire has given an extra green waste collection. Quite clearly, as we as councillors and me as the authorised spokesperson for the council have come out with a communications plan stating that we hear what the council, we hear what the community is doing, and we need to respond to what the community wants us to do. Quite simply, we gave 2 tip passes that expired in January. Members of our public have not been able to get rid of hard waste since the 1st of February. If the recommendation motion of the officers is that we leave that to August, it is some 10 months before the community has been able to get rid of their hard waste, notwithstanding the tip passes. But from October all the way through to August is 10 months where our community has not been able to get rid of their hard waste. It's quite clear, and it pains me to say this, but it's very, very clear that the community are dumping rubbish. They're dumping hard waste in areas of the Shire. That is a concern to me, and we need to stand up and stop that. I suspect, it's only suspicion, but I suspect that that will continue if the motion, if this motion is not passed and we go back to the officer's recommendation. It is all of July and sometime in August that people are going to have to stay with their hard waste collection. I think that the on-demand collection service is a good service. I don't like wasting, and it's not wasting, pardon the pun, ratepayers' money. But we need to sort this out. We need to sort this out once and for all for our ratepayers. It is clear that they want a way to get rid of their hard waste. It is clear that they don't want to spend money to go to Armidale. They don't want to spend money to go to other waste transfer stations or other tips. I'm concerned that if this motion is not passed and the officer's recommendation is passed, and that will increase in illegal dumping, which, apart from the fact being unsightly and is something that I'm not prepared to put up with as a Shire president, it will increase further costs for us as a council and our ratepayers, more importantly, to get that waste collected. The $30,000 I submit is a significant amount of money. I'm not going to shy away from that fact, but we need to fix this. We need to listen to our community and we need to give them a service that they need. Councillor Mack, did you second? I think it was Councillor Duggan. Did you want to speak or reserve?
I'll speak very briefly, thanks. I have read in the officer's report on this item that we do risk reputational damage if we implement a hard waste collection earlier than what our software is able to provide. The option of $30,000 for the additional staff to assist, I think, will go a long way towards minimising that reputational damage. I think that we need to be listening to our community. That is our most important job here on council. We need to be responding both sensibly as well as sensitively. So we need to be taking their concerns on board, but we also need to be mindful that, you know, we can't please everybody all the time. But I do think that this motion that it's been presented provides a good option to protect our reputational damage as best as we can, and still provide for our community. So that's why I support this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Bias, would you like to speak against?
I would, if I can have a question first.
Certainly.
I just want to clarify my understanding of the motion and point 4. So I'm not quite sure whether it's to yourself, Mr. President, the CEO, or the director, but that's effectively the manual version we've been discussing, where the officers will work on integrating with the provider's system, and this will be that interim measure where we have someone doing the manual, receiving CRMs, and then inputting it into the specialised system that the contract will provide.
That's my understanding. That's certainly the advice I tried to get and did receive from the staff. I don't know if the director or CEO would like to add to that.
Yes, yes, that's the answer to the question. I don't think we're exactly sure how that would entirely work unless the Director of Infrastructure wants to add to that, but there would be the manual system at the start until the software was up to date and implemented.
Want to clarify my understanding before I speak against it, and I do very reluctantly speak against the motion. Councillor Duggan has touched on reputational damage. The thing that concerns me the most is the reputational damage that we will do to the organisation if we get it wrong. And the risk, in my mind, hasn't been mitigated on 2 fronts. One is the early implementation of this manual version that will input into the providers, and I won't go into any detail because I understand it's confidential attachment, but the provider's software system. And the second part is I'm still yet to be satisfied, and this is a concern I've raised on a number of occasions over the months, that the pre-booked system will be communicated appropriately. Both Shire President and Deputy Shire President mentioned communication, the importance of communication. We've had a ratepayer in here today talking about the importance of our communication, and I still have significant concerns about how we're going to effectively communicate to ratepayers how this system works. And I am worried that the moment you start having 2 or 3 people on a street pre-booking and start putting their hard waste out, that we're going to have the whole street putting their hard waste out, and it is going to create confusion. It will cause reputational damage. And I'm like I said, I speak against this very reluctantly, but those 2 risks in my mind haven't been appropriately mitigated, and I struggle to support it on those grounds. So thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Anyone else would like to speak for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points Councillor Bice raised there. And one was concerns with the communication. I just wanted to point out that it is complex, and I do take on board what you're saying, that the communication is going to be something that's going to be imperative to this. But communication goes 2 ways. And I think one thing we've been criticised for as a council is not listening to the community, and that's half the way of the communication. So the community's telling us they want an answer. The community's telling us that they're frustrated with the situation. So I think we need to listen as well as tell the community what they can get. So I think this resolution goes a way of trying to appease the needs of the community and listening to what they have to say and having the trust in our communications team to properly communicate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Does anyone would like to speak against the motion? Thank you, Councillor Bishop.
Thanks, President Coles. Look, essentially, I just reiterate what Councillor Bias has said. I think there's too much unknown about this sort of interim measure, and please forgive me if I'm out of place here, but if this motion's not successful, I'd like to foreshadow moving the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Does anyone would like to speak for the motion? I will close the debate, and I thank everyone for their input. I'll go back to what I said when I opened the debate for the alternate motion, and that is this has been the single biggest issue that we've had to deal with as a new council since October last year. I've been very, very proud of the way the staff has responded. I'm proud of the way that council have looked at the options, and I'm proud of the way that we are trying to do the right thing for the community. My biggest concern is the $30,000. I think the communications will take care of themselves. And I say that simply because whether we do this in June or whether we do this in August, it's the same process, notwithstanding the fact that in August there will be the system set up by the tenderer. We are going to put $30,000 towards this to employ 2 staff who can assist in the matter to get the communications out to the community. I would much rather 2 people on the same street put rubbish out and hard waste out in the confusion of not knowing when it's being picked up than someone going and dumping rubbish illegally because they don't know when the next hard waste is, or they have to wait till August. And I suspect, again, I only suspect, but I suspect talking to the community and getting the feeling from the community that that will happen. People will increase their illegal dumping. A particular ratepayer has engaged with me and the Director of Corporate Services saying they refuse to pay their rates because they're not getting a service that they should be getting as a ratepayer, being the waste transfer station. I suspect that that's not the only ratepayer of our ratepayer base that is going to potentially take that action. I would never ever tell council to make a decision because we're worried about being held to ransom by council, or sorry, by the community or by ratepayers. But it's quite clear we need to listen, we need to act, we need to do. It's quite clear that the community want us to do something. I'm very, very hesitant to put $30,000 towards this, but it is the single biggest issue. And I would actually say $30,000 in this respect in relation to waste transfer is an important and necessary step. I commend this motion and it's what the community would expect us to do. All those in favour of the alternate motion? All those against? Motion is carried 4-3.
Mr. President, while the Minute Secretary records the voting, we do need a reason for the difference on the officer recommendation.
I would like it couched in the terms of to be responsive to the community needs. I don't know if that's too airy-fairy or whether that's specific enough. To be responsive to community needs, community wishes. I'm happy with that. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 10.3, which is corporate services reports. 10.3.1, confirmation of payment of creditors, March 2024. Is there a council who'd like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. What would you like to move?
Happy to move officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us on to agenda item 10.3.2, which has been moved en bloc. Agenda item 10.3.3, consideration of award and representation review in 2024. Is there a councillor who'd like to move a motion?
I'd like to move option 2, if I may, please, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. So option 2, that council requests the Chief Executive Officer commence award and representation review in time for implementation of the 2025 ordinary local government election. Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? I'm opposed to it. Councillor Duggan, would you like to open debate?
Certainly. Thanks, Mr. President. Back in the beginning of 2023, council voted to support 6 councillors and 1 president. I can only speak for myself, but I certainly saw this as a short-term solution to ensure that we kept our wards. For me, it's our wards are incredibly important because they ensure that we represent the diverse communities in which we are to stand for. And I was quite surprised to see the recommendation from the officers to not undertake a ward and representation review, because I know as a councillor last year I voted to support the 6 and 1. As part of that motion was that we would be having a ward and representation review done this year. On page 163, there's a single references that the officers have made that they do have reservations regarding the workload on councillors on its current 6 and 1 configuration. I too share those reservations. As we've seen in one of the very last items, that the number of staff in the Shire is fluid. It can be changed. I understand that this is kind of a battle between the Shire and the Shire staff and the councillors and the pressure on councillors. But as I say...
Sorry, Councillor Duggan, can you please stop talking? I'll remind members of the gallery to please stop talking. If you continue to talk and interrupt debate, I'd ask you to leave the council chambers. Apologies, Councillor Duggan.
Thanks, Mr. President. But as I say, the number of Shire staff can be fluid. It can be increased or decreased as required, whereas the number of councillors can't. I guess also that the officers have commented that currently there's been no widespread community concerns regarding the current ward and representation. I believe that's because the councillors are all working extremely hard, and I'm not convinced that this is a standard that can be upheld long term. On 161, the officers' report discusses the 10% deviation preferred by the Local Government Advisory Board. And I note that there's talk about tweaking borders of or margins of the wards to stay within that deviation. But then, as it says, we're actually not going to be truly representing the communities, because even though then we'll get within our 10% deviation, it makes a mockery of our other factors, and that is that our wards reflect our community of interest, our physical and topographical features, our demographic trends, and our economic factors. I think that we need a proper ward and representation review for another reason, and that is because we have shown that in 23rd of September in 2023, the variation between our North Ward and our South Ward was still growing. North Ward, it was plus 8.1, and South Ward, it was minus 12.3. So what we're saying is between September last year and for the next 2 years, we're expecting a 20% turnaround to get those more on an even keel. And I find that difficult to believe from the downward trend that we're currently seeing. I do hear the concerns for the Shire staff about their time. And as I say, for that reason alone is the only reason why I've put much thought into putting forward this option. But I believe that our most important role that we have as councillors is representing our communities. And it was budgeted for back in January 2023. I feel that it's something that we need to be moving forward and doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Byers, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll make some very brief points, Mr. President. Firstly, and I mean no disrespect to the officers at the time or the council at the time who made those decisions in 2023, but it was done hastily, and it was done in response to the state government's electoral reform package. So it was done at a point in time where we needed to meet a goal with the state government and the minister's reform package. Again, no disrespect to the Office of the Council who made those decisions, but that was a contextual factor that I think played into the decision making, and I don't think it was given, frankly, the time that it should have. The second point I would make is that between that point in time in 2023 and the October 2025 election, our community will have grown by something in the order of 16 or 17%. We are a hyper-growth community. We are a diverse community that changes and evolves very rapidly. It may be well and good for the state government to say, do a ward and boundary review every 8 to 10 years. If you're a leafy inner city local government whose population dribbles along at 1% a year, but that's not us. We are a hyper-growth community. We are a diverse community. And I certainly am not sitting here advocating for any particular model, ward configuration, numbers, whatever it might be. The only thing that I advocate for is that our council reflects the diversity of our community. And that is going to necessitate us doing administrative activities like these ward and boundary reviews more often than what the state government guidelines might say. So I'm quite comfortable with the resolution that's been put up. I do note the officer's time that it will require, but I do think we do need to become comfortable with a level of increased tempo with administrative activities like this, simply because of the rapid change and the rapid growth of our community. And the one thing I do want to see is our council reflecting the diversity of our ever-changing community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. I did oppose the motion and I'll speak against the motion now. One thing I'll talk about is time. Napoleon said, I can give you anything, but I can't give you time. Now, we may turn around and say that we did this quickly, we were responsive, and we did it at a time because the state government told us to. And I agree with that. So we reacted quickly. So maybe we didn't give enough time. But let's think about that theory of time and that narrative of time. This is the first council meeting that we have had 7 councillors or 6 in the president. We are now talking about changing something, doing a review into something that we haven't given time to see how it actually works. And I'm really proud of the workload of every councillor at this table that has picked up the gap with a vacancy caused by me at the 2023 election. Me becoming president meant that there was a vacant ward in the North Ward. There was only one council in the North Ward. And it may well be that people could argue the point that January was fairly quiet. But I'm really proud of everyone sitting at this table that we all got together, we made it work. Not only did we make it work, councillors, we have saved ratepayers money by having less councillors. So we can talk about time, we can talk about growth, and I'll come back to growth in a moment. But really, and I spoke to it at the previous item about $30,000, on average it's about $21,000 for a councillor, excluding myself and the deputy president. By doing a ward review, it may well be that there's extra councillors. Let's give this 12 months. Let's give this enough time to see what we as a team, and I use that term on purpose. We may not always agree, but we need to form as a team. How can we form, norm and perform? We've only got a councillor who's just joined us and this is her first meeting. How can we possibly entertain the idea of wasting officers' time, of going out to the community and talking about a ward review when we have not given ourselves enough time? I look around the table, we talk about diversity. We've got females. We've got the 2 youngest councillors I can remember for a long time. We've got councillors that have got children. We've got councillors that are single. We've got councillors that represent the 3 different wards in this wonderful shire. Let's give ourselves, let's actually back ourselves. Let's give ourselves an opportunity to see what we, as a group of 7, can actually achieve. Why go back out to the community, waste officers' time and potentially waste ratepayers' money to turn around and say, oh, we need more councillors? Do we need more councillors? Or do we need to be better in what we do? That I don't know. That is a rhetorical question because I don't know what the 7 of us can achieve. Because I'll say it again, this is our first meeting that we've had a new council and we've had 7 councillors. The other thing I'm concerned about is, and I refer on to page 163, I think is, of the agenda, where the officers quite clearly state increasing representation on council, making the significant adjustments to ward configuration that will be required to achieve elected distributions and/or dealing with the ratio deviation of the South Ward, which currently is 2% outside of the recommended threshold. It may grow over time, but then also we go back to the fact that the South Ward has actually dropped. So we go back to page 180 and the South Ward is down 2.7%. So it may increase, and certainly when Whitby comes on board and Munjong comes on board, that will increase. Is that going to be such a significant increase in the next 12, 18, 24 months that we need to do something now? That we need to waste the time of the CEO? And it's not lost on me that it's now nearly May and that dreaded R words coming up, the rates. We've got budget workshops. We're looking at the volunteer bushfire brigade enhancement. We're providing governance, management oversight of the brigades through a review of existing structures and operating procedures. Yes, we may well need a ward review, but why now? Why now in 2024, in the second quarter of 2024, and this is the first time we've had council of 7 come together? I would foreshadow the officer's recommendation. Is there anyone else that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Duggan, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mr. President. I find it very interesting, the discussions about equality, because I think that's the thing right now that I'm noticing, and that is that, as I said, we are well outside that 10% deviation for our South Ward, and comparing that to our North Ward, as I say, we're actually 20% out of our deviation, and expecting that to turn around when it's actually on a downward trend. I think that this is actually a chance for the officers and the council and our residents to have a reset and actually look at what we're expecting over the next 20 years and make plans for now, so that then we are prepared for it. The officers have already said that the borders that we have now, if we are to change them to equal out our 10% deviation, we will then not truly be reflecting our communities. We will not be truly reflecting those that are in our urban or in our rural or in our peri-urban areas. For that reason, I think that it's absolutely imperative that we start the process, we get this done now, and we set ourselves up for the next 10 years with minor changes needed in that time.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Motion is lost. It's at 5-2. 2-5, sorry, thank you. That brings us to agenda item 10.4, community.
Mr. President, you foreshadowed the officer recommendation in your debate.
Thank you.
Are you wanting to move that now?
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I would like to move the officer's recommendation, which is the council notes the report regarding future ward representation review following the 2023 ordinary government election and resolves to take no action at this time. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Anyone opposed? Thank you, Councillor Duggan and Councillor Bias. I'll open the debate with what I said before. The other thing I would stress is the workload on the officers, and again, the 3 paragraphs at the bottom of page 183 that explains that conducting a ward and representation review comes with an opportunity cost. So I would strongly support the officers' recommendation. Councillor Matt, did you want to speak for or reserve?
Yeah, thank you. I'll add a couple of points to that. Just wanted to mention, it was mentioned in the previous debate about the workload on councillors. I can only speak for myself, but I'm happy to continue to work hard as a councillor and give it a go on working with the popularly elected president and 6 councillors. As was mentioned, this is the first time we've had a full 7 members of council, and think it's a fair time to give it a go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matt. Councillor Duggan, did you want to speak against?
Thanks, Mr. President. I think I've made my points previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Does anyone want to speak for the motion?
I don't want to speak for, but I would like to ask a question.
Certainly,
if I may.
Councillor Bias.
Question to the CEO and possibly the director. noting the state government's guidelines concerning conducting these warden boundary reviews, I believe it was 8 to 10 years. Have the Shire considered how we can program this activity in so that it's not an ad hoc activity, but we actually know when it's going to occur and we have an agreed time frame on it's going to be once every 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, so that there can be certainty both for the community council and the officers with respect to programming their time?
I haven't given any thought to that. The director might like to indicate if his team has or not.
No, we've not given thought to that. Given our fast changing nature, might be worthwhile putting a time frame into this resolution, like perhaps not now, but in 5 years' time or something more frequently than 10 years, because it wouldn't be till 2032, it's 10 years now rather than 8 years that the compulsory review occurs.
I'm trying to do this on the run, which I hate doing, but I would like to move an amendment to the resolution, but I'm mindful of I can't negate it. Perhaps the CEO and the director would be happy to advise me on how we could put something in there. I don't want to make it concrete. I don't want to make it prescriptive, just something that formalizes that we do need to have a discussion about what that agreed process will be.
I don't know if I'm going to help or hinder the process, but do we do it after the 2025 election? Do we make it mandatory we do that? I would assume that any council can bring it forward at any time, notwithstanding the fact if this motion succeeds tonight or passes, it has to be 3 months before it comes back to a council meeting. But my understanding is any council can bring this back at any time.
Mr. President, I like Councillor Rice. I was thinking this is on the run, and potentially there's opportunities to have the council consider a policy on warden representation reviews through a notice of motion process at a future point in time, where everyone's got time to consider that. It doesn't say take no further action for the next 8 to 10 years. It just says take no further action at this time. That might be a way forward.
Good point, Mr. CEO. I won't complicate this with an amendment, other than to agree that that's probably the best way forward. So thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Was there anyone that wanted to speak for the motion?
I'll have a crack. I'll speak for the motion, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor Bias.
No, just because I do want to formalise what that discussion was, because we do need to give certainty to the community about how often we're going to do these. This is an administrative process that, like I said, we're going to have to get comfortable with doing it more frequently. We need to ensure that it's in a programmed, constructive way, not the ad hoc way that was forced upon us by the state government. And, to clarify the points I made before, I don't advocate for any particular model. We just need to have an agreed process for how we're going to do this, when we're going to do this. And I think a policy is a great idea. Thank you to the CEO and the directors for their suggestions. So I'm far more comfortable with this now, and I'm happy to support further discussions on how we can make this a bit more concrete and formal.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Does anyone who'd like to speak against the motion? In closing, I think we've said enough about the ward and representation review. Quite simply, I think we need time to see how the 7 councillors or 6 and 1 work, and any time someone can bring this back. And I do thank the CEO for his value adding during the comments that were made. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Motion is carried 6-1. That brings us to agenda item 10.4, which is community engagement reports. 10.4.1, Equine Advisory Group, Equine Priorities Update and Recommendations. And I think, Mr. CEO, you're going to say something.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to point out to the elected members again, and although this was communicated in an email, the report refers to option 1 and 2, and then it says option 1 is recommended. but in fact, we, in error, cut and pasted option 2 and put it as the officer recommendation. So we did circulate an email to elected members during the week. So in fact, the officer recommendation is option 1, just for the benefit of everybody, or the council considers the matter.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, for that clarification. Is there a councillor who'd like to move this motion? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Councillor Duggan, you have a second?
So Councillor Mackey moving option 1.
Yes, I am moving the officer's recommendation in option 1.
Point of order, Mr. President, and it's probably just my confusion, but wasn't 10.4.1 dealt with en bloc?
No, we removed it from the en bloc list to make that point of clarification.
Yeah, and I do apologise for any confusion, Councillor Bias. It was on my list, but I didn't read it out because of the information the CEO has just given. So we've got a mover being Councillor Mack, second to Councillor Duggan. Was there anyone opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item 10.4.2, proposed licence agreement with the Public Transport Authority Western Australia for rail land at Serpentine. That has been moved en bloc. That brings us to agenda item 10.4.3. Agenda item 10.4.3 is Community History Awards commemorative recognition of naming, for naming of award category. And I have an alternate motion, which I'm happy to move, which was circulated, I think, last Tuesday. And that is that council endorses the naming of one award category in the inaugural and subsequent Community History Awards in honour of Jane Skillington, and then requests the CEO develop a commemorative recognition policy to provide a framework for commemorative recognition of Shire facilities owned or managed by the Shire, and awards which honour individuals, organisations or events that have made a significant contribution to the Shire or the development of Western Australia. Is there a councillor happy to second that alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Motion is carried unanimously.
And Mr. President, we need a reason for the difference of the.
The reason for this difference is to acknowledge Jane Skillington, irrespective of a category not having an entrant. I don't know if you can word it better, but basically to ensure that Jane Skillington is recognised irrespective of what category.
Irrespective of applications received?
Yes, thank you. That brings us to agenda item 10.5, Executive Services Reports. There are nil reports. 10.6 is confidential reports. Can I have a councillor move to close the meeting to the members of the public? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. I would respectfully ask members of the public to please leave the chamber.